This happened in Retail WoW for a reason. It will happen in Classic WoW too. Oh boy.
Faction balance has been a pretty hot topic from day one of Classic. After all, it is one of the first choices you make when you commit to your character, Horde or Alliance. This choice will determine who you can interact with, trade with, communicate with, and play with before you can even log into the game. It's a pretty big deal. And on Classic, your faction matters. Well, it used to. Maybe that's less of the case nowadays. After all, we still do have the old school
on Retail, faction does still matter a bit, but not as much, yeah.
PvP and PvE.
Dude, this was like so fun. It's like in Phase 2 PvP was like kind of bad in a lot of ways, but it was really good in some ways too. This was really fun.
Server split and being the minority.
I remember I would log on and I would play every single day, and then whenever they added Battlegrounds, I pretty much quit the game.
The faction on a PvP server is simply not an experience that many players would actively seek out. That lone warrior fantasy traveling the lands by themselves runs into problems when you realize so much of the content in the game quite literally requires a group, and you can't even go and pick herbs out in the open world without being ganked. Over time, we've seen a shift from somewhat balanced servers in the early days of Classic.
Oh, this seems balanced to me. Yeah, totally normal, guys.
To the player base on the vast majority of servers actively sorting themselves onto realms where they are the majority. Realms where they are technically PvP tags, but where world PvP no longer happens. The 99%...
That way the classic boomers can still have their ego about playing on a PvP server, but there's nobody on the other faction.
Of one faction and the 1% of the other servers, and this has been a choice that the players have actively made and that Blizzard has failed to stop. Nothing has really ended up changing with how the servers work. It's been like a copy-paste of what happened with the retail version of the game. Players realised more people are on a different server from themselves and ended up making the swap, be it from real money or a free transfer. Except in Classic, as it tends to be the case, things have happened at a much faster rate. After all, as we started with, your faction is inherently a massive restriction. It's required for such simple things in an online world, and of course players will...
Yeah, I think the faction makes a lot more sense in like Classic WoW, but overall, I don't think this would really be a problem if it was just better designed. But the reason why they can't design it any better is because it's Classic. So it's like fundamentally the same as it used to be, which just back in the day, there were a lot of problems with the game. It's not like the problem started after Wrath. There were a lot of problems in Wrath.
Trend towards the best, largest environment where interactions can happen.
Yeah,
you might even think the game would do better.
Well, there's no value in having there's nothing that makes being on a dead server better other than like being able to maybe kill rare spawns more often. Like it's pretty much like you trade off like 100 positives for like 100 positives for like 3 positives that don't matter.
Without the restriction of factions, let players choose their allies and their enemies within the game, instead of having such an arbitrary system which determines it for them. But then again, that wouldn't be very Classic-like, would it? And whilst the server situation may be a bit too far gone, if we look at the sources we have available, such as Ironforge.pro, about the total numbers of characters across both factions, they are not too far off from one another. About 47% Alliance to 53% Horde. A bit of a skew towards the dogs, but nothing too crazy, I would say. If Classic has shown us one thing though, it's that if things don't change, history does tend to repeat itself. There's something which happened on retail World of Warcraft over a very long period of time, something that has started to happen during Wrath of the Lich King, and something that hasn't been fully remedied and embraced as a major expansion feature until Dragonflight.
And what's
what started off as flavorful racial bonuses has escalated into things such as sharding, war mode, and finally cross-faction play. And the same problem...
I think sharding, war mode, and cross-faction play made the game better. I will tell you that. Now, I think that cross-faction play, maybe not in like Classic WoW, I think that it did make the game better. 100%. As somebody who's played retail WoW for the whole time around, sharding is only bad because it is done badly. It is not bad on a fundamental level.
That led to these solutions will happen in Classic. Today I'm going to explain why something so small as a difference in racial bonuses led to Blizzard breaking down the faction barrier nearly 2 decades later. Ulduar in Wrath Classic is the right time to be making this video too, because throughout Classic so far, you've nearly always gone into a raid thinking, I wonder what the bosses will be dropping tonight, not, I wonder if we're going to be progressing any further on this boss tonight. Sure, there have been fights with a degree of challenge throughout Classic so far, but Ulduar will be a step up on another level, since it's the first raid to ever offer an optional difficulty in hard.
Makes me, bro, I can't even see Ulduar and not get mad. I just look at the boss, it makes me mad. Look, I see his face, I say, oh, you fucking bitch.
Hard mode, which has been specifically tuned up for a greater level of challenge. And whilst I can't say how...
Keep in mind, also the loot has been improved as well.
Trial of the Grand Crusader or Icecrown Citadel Heroic will measure up, because we don't know if Blizzard's gonna be buffing them or not. This trend of a divide between normal mode and heroic mode only grows the longer World of Warcraft goes on. The first tier of Cataclysm, should we get there, will be hands down harder than anything in Wrath, and it won't even be close. And as
it was insanely fucking hard. Like, Cataclysm took guilds and pugs that were clearing 8 or 7 of 12 heroic ICC 25 men down to 10-man normals, wiping on Magma. Like, Omnitron defense system, wipe fest. It was fucking brutal.
raiding gets harder, people look towards the top end for guidance, tips and tricks, and to see how they are setting up and building their characters, including, of course, racials. Now I just want to mention here, this isn't supposed to devolve into a what racials are best in Wrath Classic, or a classic good retail bad thing, or a but you guys have this for PvP so it's okay we have better racials in PvE thing. It turns out you give people a faction and they get rather tribal about it. And the thing is, we know for a fact which racials were better and which ones have the largest impact. A recent blue post on a change to Unholy Death Knight summon gargoyle ability in Classic even highlighted a specific example where a racial made a huge difference, to the point where this one race combined with this class and spec could beat anyone else in the game every single time.
Well, it's just not fun to play a game whenever one class does way more damage than everybody else and nobody else even has a chance for competing against it. That's the way it was in Classic with warriors and rogues and like mages and warlocks to an extent. I think like obviously like towards the end of Nax you had a lot more classes on the meter, but like in Wrath it was just DKs. It was DKs and that's it. Get good, stop whining. You can't get good. If you were good, you'd know that you couldn't do that. It's not good design to have a class that just does more damage than everybody else and nobody else can even get close to it.
To put two people of equal skill, equal gear, who get the same RNG during a fight against one another. Player A is playing a troll, player B is playing, well, it doesn't matter to be honest, because player A wins every single time.
That's right.
And player B probably isn't going to feel too good about that either. Berserking has to be one of the most extreme examples of a racial which was left overpowered for so long it's hard to believe. I went and checked and it was only moved down from 20% haste to 15% in Warlords of Draenor. This is just one example of a racial that more performance-oriented players may look towards though. Even in Wrath the Lich King right now, how big of a difference are these racials making at the top end? Well, I went through the logs for the top 100 players in raid damage for Phase 1, and have a guess out of the top 100 players, how many Alliance were there? If you said a grand total of 0, you would be right.
0 out of 100 are all, okay, yeah, big fucking surprise, are all Alliance. Again, and you know what this does is it creates like this trickle down effect where like the hardcore players go Horde because that's the best. And then the semi-hardcore players go Horde because that's where the hardcore players are at and that's where they want to play with. And then the casual, like maybe hardcore a little bit players go over there because that's where the semi-hardcore players are and that's who they want to play with. So it just creates this trickle-down effect of everybody moving over there because they want to have the best opportunity to play with the best players.
Top 100 logs for overall raid damage in Phase 1, 100% Horde. I thought there might have been 1 or 2, so I decided to extend the search a bit. How many Alliance are there in the top 1,000 logs for Phase 1?
Be like 2,
1,000
right?
is a big number after all, and yes, there is going to be a few it's not that bad. But if you said there was, out of 1,000 logs, 56 alliance, that would be correct. And to be honest, the majority are in
56?
2 guilds which are setting themselves up for passing success, but that's kind of how passing goes. So overall, if we look at the population for Horde versus Alliance across all realms, you'll remember it's about 53% Horde players to 47% Alliance. Now if we look at the population for the top 1,000 performers in Phase 1, 95% of them are Horde, 5% are Alliance.
So guess what's going to happen? More and more people are going to go over to Horde. And then at a certain point, whenever people see that everybody's going over to Horde, then everybody goes over to Horde because that's where it's easier to find groups.
But this all doesn't really matter, does it? The top-end Giga Min-Maxi players are always going to do the best thing for their DPS and for their character, and very high-end passing is sketchy anyways. It's just creative loopholes to get around rules to inflate your number on a third-party website. This is just 1%.
It's crazy to me how much people care about parsing, but I used to do the same back in the day.
Doing 1% things, right? Well, sure, it is at the moment. It seems truly unimportant. And many years ago, this was also the situation on retail too. However, much like the servers going from relatively balanced to monofaction, this will have long-term effects. And it does start right at the top with the 1%. It also starts alongside raids getting harder. The top players start making the swap to the best race, not just to pass or to speedrun.
Because that's another thing about Classic WoW is like in Classic WoW, you could carry a rep paladin. It didn't matter. But like in Wrath, it gets harder. So it becomes more important to bring the better comps. So it's like if they made, like for example, if they made Nax Ramus in 60 Nax, if they made it like twice as hard, like let's say, but like guess what would happen? There would be no rep paladins and no moonkins. Because less people can afford to lose that DPS because of the efficiency.
But to get the first clears in gear which can barely scrape by the DPS requirements. And in Classic we've had plenty of knowledge in advance of the faction to play to push performance more and more, and Warcraft logs that we just looked at, that really...
Bro, if they're popping hero to kill the heart, they're not killing this boss.
Supports it as well. Raiding is also incredibly popular in Classic. Over the past 2 weeks there were over 20 million individual passes logged worldwide. I think retail raiding picked up in popularity considerably over time too, but it isn't as big as it once was.
And it never will be. Retail raiding is dying because raids are harder to do, they're more annoying, they waste more of your time, and they give you oftentimes worse gear for comparative difficult content.
A lot more difficulties in
Mythic
retail,
plus
so
guild
it's kind
raiding.
of hard to see everything in one place. But as more people get invested into raiding and to look to the top end players for help, more and more people see the fact that if I really want to improve, I should be playing a certain faction.
Exactly.
It leads
This is
to
what
a
happened in
mental
retail.
reinforcement that if I want to be good and play with good players, I should be on the Horde. This is the point where it starts to not just be the 1% anymore. It's trickling down to players who are going to take 1 month to clear the latest raid, but see and think they need to be playing a certain faction to do so. Eventually, Mythic raiding releases. Raids start getting even harder. We also have Mythic Plus, another feature that's only available to players on your own faction. By this point, there's been years of Horde dominance in the PvE scene. Do you want to guess when the last World First was won by an Alliance guild in WoW? It was Madness of Deathwing in Kata, and I'm just saying...
Jesus Christ. Nah, that can't be true. Nah, bro, there's no way. There's no way that's... Nah, bro, like, there's no... Nah, there's no way.
The world's best guild at the time, Paragon, who were Horde by the way, got a ban for this tier. That probably helped out the situation quite a bit, but after so many years of the thought that you should be Horde to compete and to be able to clear, it eventually came true. Enough of the player base that did want to push performance, that wanted to try high keys, that wanted to find a guild to move to Mythic, ended up moving to Horde. Alliance guilds made shifts towards playing on Horde servers and saw their pool of applicants go up 10 times overnight.
It was this one time I did a group and I was like, okay, who wants to come and join my group for Mythic Castle Nathria? I had like 5 people apply. And then I said, okay, let's just test this out. Let's see who's going to join my group for Mythic Castle Nathria on Horde. And I made a group. Like 37 applicants instantaneously, 38, 50, 80, 120, you know, we're capping out like 153. It's like, okay, now it's going all the way up to 160. Bro, like everybody's there. People are ready. They're linking like Realm First achievements. They've got best in slot gear. You go back to Alliance and this guy's like, oh, well, I don't have the item level, but me and my friend, we thought we could maybe just go over and join. Oh, it's for Castle Nathria? Oh, fuck. I thought it was for Siege of Orgrimmar. Never mind. We're trying to get the shoulders from the last boss. Oh, bro. Like, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. And that was it. Alliance was awful.
Invested in Mythic Plus made the swap and found the group finder full all day, every day. This was not the experience they could have had on the Alliance. And finally, from starting with the 1%, moving down to the semi-hardcore, this eventually hits the casual players, and this is where it really becomes a problem. My friends have moved to the Horde. I can't play the race I want to in a fantasy world due to faction restrictions. I was a casual player in a guild, and now they've left the server. They're all gone. Would you say this won't happen again on Classic? Or the ball to get this whole situation rolling hasn't already set in motion? You know, the faction change feature in the cash shop came out in Original Wrath, and Blizzard have mentioned plans to bring it back for Wrath Classic. It's just not in yet. There's going to be plenty of very...
I think that it would be a mistake to add faction change, because if they add it in, then everybody is just going to swap to Horde. That's really the truth. Yeah, it's already in? Oh. Uh-oh.
Swift re-rollers, I am betting. So can we stop this whole situation from happening again? Well, I mean, not having faction transfers helps a lot, if I'm honest. At least people who have invested so much into their character aren't going to want to make the swap, even if it meant they would be...
But, like, that's not a good thing. Like, the problem is, like, the way to solve this problem is not to just not do it either. Because I think it's really shitty that people that are playing the game should have to, they should have to just, like, play on an inferior faction. Like, they should just let you do what you do in retail. Just group cross-faction in instances. I mean, that's what I think they should let you do.
Able to improve their raid performance. Perhaps this feature shouldn't come back to the game after all. Do we remove racials? I mean, it would certainly work in the most boring way possible. And let's be honest, if racials were ever going to be removed, it would have been experimented with at some point by now in Arena, and it hasn't. I don't think this is even worth considering. Well, just to balance the racials then, duh. If only it was that easy. It can't happen ever, unless they are all the same. Racials are a choice, and when you have a choice, there will be better and worse.
Well, that's not entirely true. Like in retail WoW, there's a lot of diversity with what classes and what races people play. There actually is. If you go and you look at the class makeup and the race makeup in these different classes, in these different fights, you will see a lot of different types of players, right? Like not in PvP. Well, okay, all right. Let's look right now. Arena 3v3 ladder. Let's look at the top 10 warriors. Okay, and we're gonna look at. Solo shuffle. Let's look at 3v3. Top 10 warriors. Okay, one. Let's see. Jesus, this is not looking good for us. Okay. Wow, this is really... Oh my god. I'm gonna just do all the warriors from the first and the second one, okay? So, there we go. And... Come on, where are they? Oh, there's 2. Okay, good. All right, so we've got Dwarf, Night Elf, or Night Elf, Iron Dwarf, Orc, Blood Elf, Orc, Gnome, Dark Iron Dwarf, Human. There you go. So look at that. That's pretty fucking good. So yes, that's actually true. Like, I'm not lying.
That's choice for you. So should we just throw the floodgates open and have cross-faction play? If you remember, Classic has cross-faction battlegrounds and has had them since as early as TBC. That certainly did not happen back in the day. If PvPers can have it, what about the rest of us? Or do we just not need to think about this yet? Cross-server play was a thing long before cross-faction came in retail, and for Classic, it doesn't look like we're getting cross-server for PvE anytime soon, if ever. We still don't even have the looking for...
Yeah, I think they should make cross-server for PvE content in Wrath. I think that playing on a dead server is a bad experience, and I don't really care about like immersion whenever the alternative for that is ruining another person's experience. As somebody who plays on a dead server, my experience in the game is vastly diminished and made like much worse because of the server that I play on. Straight up, just for that.
Dungeon system in Wrath Classic. On top of that, the bigger servers in Classic are locked. Unless you already play there, you cannot move a new character there or make a new character. Yeah. This has been the case for some time. One of the big things that kept the trend moving towards re-rolling Horde was that everyone knew the big servers, and since on retail they can split the population up via sharding, there weren't restrictions on the transfers as there have been in Classic. These two differences between the retail and the Classic versions of the game might be bigger than we think. Overall, looking at the situation, for me, I've seen what happened in the past and how top-end players are already heavily trending towards Horde in Classic. I can't help but think what's happened in retail will repeat itself.
And see, I'll show you guys what the problem with parsing is, okay? Watch what Willy does here.
Towards Horde in Classic. I can't help but...
Right here, if Willy got Frost Nova'd here, he would have Nova'd the tank and also these guys.
Think what's happened.
And then he moved right here. If he had got targeted, it would have Frost Nova'd all of these people. But it doesn't matter because he's parsing. He's trying to parse. He's trying to do as much damage as possible.
In retail will repeat itself in Classic, and as per usual, at a considerably faster rate. Perhaps how the servers are in Classic with locks and no faction transfers is doing more work than we give it credit for, and this all won't be a problem until the casuals start to feel the effect, by which time, of course...
Yeah, and the casuals started feeling the effect of this, like, back in, like, I don't know, like, I'm trying to think about, like, what expansion this was, but it was some point in... like, I would say, like, BFA, and then into Shadowlands. It was getting really bad.
It's far too late. But those are just my thoughts on the game after having played it for, you know, a little while. You reckon this will be an issue in Classic at all, where everyone feels forced to go Horde eventually? And is there a solution to this which you think could realistically work? That's all for today though. As always, thank you all so much for watching and for listening in. And I'll see you all in the next one very soon.
Here it is. Personally, I think that they should just make it to where you can play cross-faction and cross-server. There's no value in having servers. They improve nothing for the player. They are a technological limitation, and they make the game worse for anybody who's not in a beneficial server. There's no reason for it to exist. There's no reason for it to exist like back then, other than tech. That's it. Yeah, there's the video. I'm tired of no changes mentality. I'm all in. Yeah, they need at some point to actually make the game better. I think they should assign an alliance server with similar size Horde server and do cross realm. Yeah, that would work too. Obviously, like having auto balancing, but that's effectively like sharding. I was alliance on a Horde majority PvP server. It was absolutely miserable. I was getting griefed and camped just for existing in the realm. I tried my best to tolerate it and play along with the world PvP, as I had enjoyed it as a kid, but with everyone min-maxing stuff now, it's not the same because everyone wants to have the highest advantage they can get, which is what I think contributed to the drastic shift in the server population balance. Yep, there you go. I eventually transferred off to an ally server because I couldn't even play the game anymore. Yep, there you go. Time Preach suggested that such strong bonuses like haste or attack power buffs can be tied to progressions rather than races. Oh, professions rather than races. I hope Classic Engineering does this. Yeah, but that creates another problem in itself, right? That's not really a solution. Let's see here. Faction divide only works if you have one giant mega server. Otherwise, one side will always dominate a server eventually. I think that's definitely true too. Until that server goes one faction. Yeah, I think the reason why classic servers never really had that issue is they didn't last long enough for it to happen. Because usually things start pretty balanced, and then as people see that they are imbalanced, it just becomes more and more imbalanced. That's the way things go. Let's see what the rest of these are. The only thing that'd be harmed is changes World PvP, which is about 99.8% ganking. Well, I think that you can keep World PvP, but I do think War Mode is better. I feel like War Mode is like an objectively better version of World PvP. I don't think there's any value that is created in forcing people into non-consensual PvP situations. This only makes their experience worse, and it only serves to make the experience of people playing the game that don't want a PvP like worse. And it rewards people that are like no-lifers. That's it. Yeah, just do War Mode. Exactly. War Mode is just PvE server? Yeah. I love the get good, nice philosophy, but it's like that's not really the way that it works, though. Like, it's really not. Like, you're not really getting good whenever 5 people come and kill you. That's not get good. That's just you lose. Like, that's it. But it is consensual. You chose to be on a PvP server. I think a lot of people chose to be on a PvP server, but whenever there is an imbalance, like let's say you chose to be on Faralina, for example, at the beginning of Classic WoW. Well, Faralina was about 55% Horde, 45% Alliance. That's pretty good. So why should your choice be like enforced on you? And like at that time, okay, sure. Yeah, you can make that argument. That's fair. But the problem is that a year later, whenever the faction completely fucking dies and you're still stuck there, is it fair to say, oh, well, you should have known that this thing that you couldn't have predicted to happen, or nobody could realistically predict what would have happened? It's not fair. So like now you have to pay Blizzard $25 because they've engineered a situation that creates an unfun experience? No, that's ridiculous. Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah, more monies. Yeah, I disagree with you, but I can see the point. Being ganked was always a way to create a group to fight the other faction back. The problem is that that's not the experience that most people go through. And that's what I think a lot of World PvP enjoyers don't understand. Because if this was actually the norm, that World PvP gave people like an opportunity to fight back against the other faction, you would not see server populations turning into what they do now. This is literal fucking evidence against that. You can say, oh, well, that's people like that. It's good. No, it's not, because every single person that's on one of these servers, minus 1 or 2 of them, has completely moved away from it. And they are all one faction servers. That's just the truth. That's just what happened. You can talk about an idea all you want, but this is what happened. It was the player's choice to switch factions, causing the other to die off. This scenario was created by Blizzard. Yes, Blizzard is God, and if something bad happens in the game, it's their fault. Yeah, who the fuck wants 1v5s? Of course they move. Yeah, it's not even a question. Look at Grobulus. Grobulus is a server with a balanced population. Why would I look at Grobulus whenever Grobulus is the exception and not the rule? It's not even the biggest server. That doesn't even make sense. Why would I look at the one server that's like, oh yeah, oh well, look at the outlier. Well, I mean, look at this. I mean, there's an exception, so that means it's not true because there's one exception. Look at the one exception. See? Don't you see the exception? Yeah, so that means your rule's wrong. Jesus Christ, how dumb do you have to be? When people said the same about Firemaw, and as soon as people could transfer off, they did. Yep, there you go. That's what happens. And it's just, look, I don't know what they can do, but apparently they need to change a lot of stuff. You have some very special streams in your people in your streams, bro. Legit sounds like paid comments. No, I think that there's a lot of people that a lot of the World PvP, classic PvP enjoyers that want to force other people into non-consensual PvP, they are losers. And they're stupid. They're actually stupid, and they're actually losers. because they can't compete on an even playing field, and they have to force people that are weaker than them into fighting so they can get easy W's because they can't get them in arena. That is what it is. Okay, so anyway, let's see here. It's not joining a PvP server, not consensual. I will repeat one more time, and then we're going to watch the Dungeons & Dragons trailer. The reason why that doesn't work is because the decision that you make is a decision that you make on August 13th, 2020. Well, what happens on August 13th, 2021? What happens if the server balance completely changes? Should you still have to be held accountable for a decision that you made? And then things completely change that were out of your control, and then your experience in the game is now massively diminished because of that? Should you be punished for that? That's ridiculous.
A trip, what needed, trip.